In this part of the exercise, we will see how we will activate the button in the code and how the application will respond when the user clicks on the button. So in order to do that, let's go back to our main activity.java file, and in here we need references to the UI widgets on the screen. First and foremost, let me introduce a variable to hold the reference to the button on the screen. So I type in button and greet button. Now, in case Android Studio is unable to resolve a symbol that you type in, then it'll show up in red color. Very often this requires you to import certain libraries. So to do so, put your cursor on the screen and then import the appropriate library. For a Mac, you hold the option and hit the return. For a Windows device, you would be holding down the Alt and return key. Okay, once we have the reference, then in the onCreate method, we get a reference to the greet button on the user interface. So to do so, let me type in the code. Whenever you reference a UI widget in code, you would see this standard pattern being used for these widgets. So you would see the variable name and then followed by a casting of the subsequent code by specifying the appropriate UI widget type, which in this case is a button. And then we would say find view by ID. Now, fortunately in Android Studio, as you type, it comes up with suggestions. Very often it is valuable to make use of these suggestions to complete the code so that you wouldn't be typing in errors within the code. Now, once you type in this find view by ID, this is a way of getting a reference to a widget on the user interface by specifying it using the ID of that widget. Now, looking at this code, it becomes more clearer to you why we gave IDs to those widgets on the user interface, so that it becomes easier for us to reference them within the code. So in this case, I want to get a reference to the greet button on the UI. So I would type in r.id, and as you see, Android Studio comes up with suggestions of already existing IDs. So it's a good practice to make use of the suggestions in order to avoid errors within your code. So you type in r.id.greetButton. So you see that if you need to reference any UI widget to which you have given an ID in the code, then the standard way of referencing it is by specifying r.id dot and the name or ID you give to that particular UI widget. In addition, we want to be able to activate this button by including appropriate code to respond when the user clicks on this button. So the next step, I am going to set up a on-click listener for this greet button. So I type in on-click listener, and then I would say this, meaning that I am expecting this class to implement the on-click listener. When I complete this, you notice that Android Studio comes up with a red light bulb on the left side. Just click on that and then it'll make some suggestions for you on how we can resolve problems that Android Studio is seeing on this particular statement. So in this case, it says make main activity implement the listener. So let's go ahead and select that. Now, obviously, you can type in the code if you want to directly, but I wanted to illustrate to you how you can take the help of Android Studio to fill in some of the code for you on your behalf. Now, very often it is useful to take the help of Android Studio in order to avoid typing errors within the code. Simple things as avoiding syntax errors that might creep into your code because you forgot a semicolon somewhere or you forgot a closing parenthesis somewhere. Okay, so let me go ahead and make use of this window to insert the code. So when I click on that, you notice that automatically the Android Studio has changed this line of code here to say implements view on click listener. And in addition, at the bottom, you see the method for on click being the stub method for on click inserted into the code. Now we go into this stub method that has been inserted there and then add code in order to activate the button. So to do that, let's go into this code. And very often when you go into this code, one of the parameters coming in for the on-click method is the view. This identifies which particular view on the UI has been clicked by the user. My typical way of making use of this is that I would put a switch statement in here and then I would say view get ID so that I am able to identify which view has been clicked, or for example in this case which button has been clicked. So in this case I notice that there is only a single button on the user interface, so I would type in case r.id.greet button. So that is one of the cases that I need to handle within the switch statement. Normally when I type in code, I tend to fill in some of the skeleton code first before moving in to fill in the actual details. Now in a switch statement you always need to give a default, which in this case we don't wish to do anything, so I'll just leave it empty with a break statement there. Now what we need to realize is that when the greet button is clicked, we want to change the text view that is displaying hello world and change that to reflect the name of the friend that has been clicked. Now in here I will add in the code in order to reference the text view and the edit text field. So let me get a reference to the text view field. So the text view field is, I will name it as text message. Again, you would notice the standard pattern that we use whenever we need to get a reference to a view on the user interface. So I would say find view by ID, text view, find view by ID, r.id dot, and then text message. That's the name that I gave. Now normally when I write code, I tend to use names that are meaningful. And also within the code, when I introduce a variable, I will use the same name as the ID that I give to the view, just so that it's easy for me to track down what is going on. Now again, as you see, the text view is complaining with red color, so I import the appropriate library here. And then the other one that I want to be able to get a reference to is the edit text field. That was named as find view by ID, r.id.edit friend name. Now, why do I get a reference to the edit text field? Now, I need this reference in order to be able to extract the name that the user types in that field. and then make use of it when I'm constructing the string for displaying the greeting message on the screen. So I get a reference to the edit text field, and then I would say now I want to be able to extract the friend's name. So I would say string friend name, and from the edit friend name I would say get text. But when it returns the text, it will return it as a character buffer, so I need to convert it to a string. So I would use the standard provisioning within Java to say get text to string, and so this will give me the name of my friend that I typed into the edit text field in the form of a string here. I can now make use of this to construct the greeting string. So let me go down into the switch statement, and for the case when the greet button has been clicked, let me add in the code to respond to the greet button. So within the switch statement, it is indicating in case I drop into this part of the code, then it means that the greet button must have been clicked by the user. So to respond to that, I would type in saying text message set text. So this is a way of changing the text that is being displayed on the UI within a text view. So this is how you would change the text being displayed in the text view. So I would say set text and good day, and I will add in my friend name variable here. If you want to be a bit more clearer, you can add in spaces in there. Again, this is your preferred style of writing code. Now we have typed in the code in here in order to display the greeting message to the user on the user interface. Now within Android, very often when you use strings like these, Android Studio will come up with a suggestion like a yellow bulb here, indicating to you that perhaps you may want to consider an alternative way of specifying that string. One reason we may want to use a string resource in order to specify these strings is because in case we want to develop your app with a multilingual interface or targeting multiple languages, you may want to replace that string with a different kind of string in a different language. When you click on that yellow bulb there, it'll say extract string resource, and so let's go ahead and click on that, and it'll come up with this suggestion for you. So I would say greet string. So in this window I will type in a resource name for this as greet string and click on OK. So in that case, you see that Android Studio has replaced that string there with get string r.string.greetString. Now you must be wondering where this r.string.greetString is stored. This is a good point for us to visit the resources folder to understand how we can make use of resources within Android applications. Now, when you go to the resources folder and then open the values subfolder here, you would see this file called as strings.xml. Go ahead and click and open that strings.xml file, and in here you see certain resources being declared here. So in Android, this is one way of specifying resources that you're going to use, string resources that you're going to use within the code. So this is, for example, a collection of string resources. Earlier we have already seen the use of layout resource here. Later on we will come across other resources that are used within your Android application, like drawables and menu resources and so on in more detail. Now the reason why we separate resources from the actual code is to ensure that if we need to, we can simply update just the resources part without having to rewrite the code for our application. So this completes the modification that we need to do to the main activity.java. Now let's go ahead and deploy this application on the emulator and see how it works in practice. Once Gradle completes building the project, it will pop up this window, and then let's go ahead and select the emulator and click on OK, and then you will see your application running on the emulator's window. Now when you type in your friend's name, save, and then click on the greetings button, you would notice that the message has now been changed to Good Day John. Let's try one more. Friend's name. So whenever you click on the greetings button, the text view displaying the greetings message changes accordingly. So this completes part 2 of the exercise.